There's anger in Morocco, and it's directed at the man at the very top of the United Nations. After Ban Ki-moon described Morocco's presence in the contested Western Sahara as an occupation, the government in Rabat now wants to cut its support for the UN mission there. Has the UN's position actually changed, or was it just the Secretary-General's personal view on a sensitive topic? And how will the Western Sahara conflict be affected? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm Kamal Santamaria. United Nations diplomats, in fact diplomats in general, usually choose their words pretty carefully. However, the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon is probably wishing he'd been a bit more careful when he chose the word occupation to describe Morocco's presence in the Western Sahara. Ban used the word after visiting a Sahrawi refugee camp in Western Algeria earlier this month. Since then, there's been a bit of backpedaling. The UN said that the comment reflected Ban's, quote, personal reaction to the deplorable conditions those refugees have been living in for more than a generation now, in fact. But the terminology has inflamed the Moroccan government. They say the UN chief has abandoned his, quote, neutrality, objectivity and impartiality. So then Ban Ki-moon met with Morocco's foreign minister, perhaps a chance to draw a line under the whole thing. Not exactly. Ban instead expressed how angry and disappointed he was at both the government's reaction and the street protests you're looking at now. Massive crowds of Moroccans marched in Rabat on Sunday to denounce Ban's remarks, many of them encouraged to do so by political leaders. Morocco's now said it will cut back on staffing at the UN mission in the Western Sahara, which is based in that disputed territory, and it's threatening to pull its troops out of the United Nations peacekeeping missions worldwide. Now, you're possibly wondering at this point why there's been such a big reaction to this. Well, the answer is rooted in the origins of this Western Sahara conflict. So I want to take you through that. It goes back to 1975, when Morocco took control of the area after colonial power Spain withdrew. Its inhabitants are known as Sahrawis, a distinct cultural and ethnic group. Many Sahrawis wanted nationhood. They began an armed resistance in 1973 under the banner of a liberation movement called the POLISARIO Front. The separatist war with Morocco dragged on until 1991, when the UN brokered a ceasefire. And as part of that deal, Morocco was supposed to hold a referendum in Western Sahara to decide whether it should become independent. The Rabat government, meanwhile, encouraged new populations to move into the territory. I'll say, though, that referendum has never happened, and a more recent Moroccan plan for regional autonomy hasn't happened either. So that sets out the story. We're going to get the thoughts of our guests now. Let's introduce them to you. In Rabat, first of all, is Samir Benis, who's the editor-in-chief of MoroccoWorldNews.com. We go to Athens for Christos Tsatsoulis, who is a former UN peacekeeper and field commander in Western Sahara, so he'll give us a unique perspective. And in New York, Khan Ross is the executive director of the consultancy group Independent Diplomat, and Khan has actually acted as an advisor for the Polisario Front. So again, another interesting perspective to come there. Gentlemen, great to have you all with us. We thank you for your time. Samir in Rabat, let me start with you. The word occupation. It is a contentious word at the best of times. Did Ban Ki-moon misstep, do you think, by using that word in the first place?
Hi. First of all, thank you for having me here to speak about this issue. I think, as many observers think, the use of the word occupation is a flagrant violation of, first, of international law, of the UN practice, and of the mandate entrusted to the Secretary General by the Security Council. Since for over 3 decades, all UN resolutions adopted by the Security Council or the General Assembly or other entities, none of them refers to the conflict or to Morocco as a country that occupies the Sahara. The Sahara is considered as a non-self-governing territory, and Morocco is the main part of it, as is the country that has the territory and under its sovereignty, although it is not recognized by the UN. So for the UN Secretary General to go to the Tindouf camps and to use this term and also to add insult to injury and to refer to the self-determination, that shows that he did not only overstep his mandates and violated international law, but he showed bias for the Polisario. As
so you think
UN
that
chief, his role.
This is what I was going to ask you. As a UN chief, should he not have a personal opinion? It should be more nuanced than that.
As a UN chief, he should be guided by neutrality and impartiality, and steer away of any word that could escalate tension or expand it between the parties. The use of the word occupation, UN Secretary General cannot use his personal opinion. He represents the whole United Nations. He cannot. He's not representing member states. He should steer away from expressing bias for any of the parties.
Okay.
When he used the word occupation, he clearly showed what party he stands for.
Right. Khan Ross, let me bring you into the conversation from New York.
And
Just hold on a moment for me, please, Samir, because I do want to hear from our other guests as well. Khan Ross, let me come to you. Maybe, here's an idea, Ban Ki-moon did it on purpose. He knew what the reaction was. He knew he was expressing an opinion that would bring a reaction like that, but he was fine with that.
Well, Ban Ki-moon chooses his words carefully. I think he's known for that. And in contrary to the recitation of Moroccan government propaganda that you've just heard, I think we need to be clear what has happened here. The Secretary-General has drawn attention to a dispute that has gone unresolved for a generation and has left 150,000 refugees in terrible conditions in the middle of the Sahara desert for a generation. And the reason for this is because Morocco has blocked negotiations as it is required to undertake by the Security Council. Your previous speaker expressed outrage at the use of the word self-determination. His own government has accepted that there needs to be a mutually acceptable solution based on the principle of self-determination. That is clearly reiterated over and over and over again in the Security Council resolutions and was reiterated by the Secretary-General during his visits to the Tindouf camps. The fact that Morocco has gone hysterical over his use of the word occupation is an attempt to distract from this central issue and is utterly consistent with Morocco's propaganda over this issue for many years, where it has constantly thrown up smoke and distraction to try to distract people from the central fact that it has refused to negotiate over the future of this territory as it is required to do. I have been following this dispute for many years, not only as a member of Independent Diplomat, but also as a British diplomat sitting on the Security Council. I've known every personal envoy for the Secretary-General for several years, and each one of them has told me that Morocco has essentially refused to engage on the substance. It has shouted bluster, it has shouted insults, this time at the Secretary-General, which I think is an outrage and needs to be condemned very loudly by the Security Council itself, only to distract from its central refusal to do what it is required to do by the Security Council.
Samir, I will let you answer those claims just quickly, and then we'll bring Christos in. Christos, I haven't forgotten about you, don't worry. Samir, let's hear from you.
First of all, if we're here on this debate, we have to avoid using words such as propaganda, because I am here, I am not representing Morocco, I am an expert, I have studied the issue for 25 years. So please show respect to others. We are here debating as intellectuals. We are not here debating as diplomats or as Polisario versus Morocco. I am here debating as someone who has been observing this for 25 years. So and here I come back to what you said about referendum and self-determination. I have to put things into context and tell you that first of all, in 1991, when the Security Council adopted the settlement plan, the settlement plan has a procedural flaw. Why? Because all the Morocco and Polisario accepted to go ahead with the plan. In principle, they had so many reservations, and they conveyed these reservations to Issa Diallo, who at the time was entrusted by the then USG Perez de Cuellar to lead the task force that was in charge of preparing the settlement plans. But the problem is that the Issa Diallo neither transmitted Morocco's reservations to the Security Council nor to the other members of the task force. So this shows clearly that Morocco and POLISARIO never agreed on the same interpretation of the settlement plans. And here I should quote Javier Pérez de Cuellar, who at the time was SG. In his memoirs, he says, "I was never convinced that independence promised the best future for the inhabitants of the Western Sahara." And before the adoption of the plan, Pérez de Cuellar was convinced also that the settlement plan could not meet the aspirations of Morocco and POLISARIO, and compromise should be sought by both parties.
Okay,
and,
Samir,
James Baker was.
I'm going to interrupt. Now, let me interrupt just because we've got a lot to get through, and I know you've got a lot to talk about there, but I do really want to bring Christos Tsatsoulis in because he has been waiting there in Greece and can give us a different sort of perspective, I think, as well. I wonder about this Moroccan government reaction because they're threatening to pull out their forces from the Western Sahara and from other UN peacekeepers. Wouldn't this almost backfire against them, sort of, undercutting themselves?
So from personal experience, the support provided by the Moroccan government to the UN mission, to MINURSO, it's absolutely vital. So if Moroccan government are serious on going one step further and really withdraw their support, I'm not sure that the UN mission in Western Sahara can actually live any longer. Even beyond that, I would say that the actual everyday support we had from the local Moroccan military commanders was also of high value. And in everyday operations in such really harsh environments, such as the Sahara Desert, such kind of cooperation is crucial. So even I can imagine that even if Moroccan government does not withdraw its support officially, but simply states an order down the chain of command to their local commanders, ordering them, okay, gentlemen, now you are going to support them only by the book. You will support the UN only by what is explicitly written in the book. Believe me, I wouldn't like to be present as a UN peacekeeper under such a situation.
Can you tell me, Christos, more about the force itself? Because you supervised the ceasefire, you've led patrols for the UN there, you've been on the ground. I want to know more about the size, the strength, the effectiveness of this force in its job.
From a point of view, the conflict, the military part of the conflict in Western Sahara has actually been frozen for at least 20 years now. There have not been any kind of actual hostilities between the belligerent parties since 1991. So this is the pleasant, let's say, part. So practically, the military part of the UN mission only supervises the written terms on the ceasefire. We were not engaged in any other kind of activities, including, for example, humanitarian aid or something like that. But I'm strictly speaking about the military part of MINURSO mission.
Okay, let's bring Khan Ross back in from New York, because something Christos said there struck me. He said there's basically been no military action. There's been no hostilities for years now. But you pointed out as well that there's been no movement either on the diplomatic front as well. Maybe this whole issue of one word, occupation, at least that brings it up into the spotlight again. We're talking about it on this program here. If it's a stalled process, maybe it gets a bit of airtime now and people actually hear about it and understand that there is a frozen process there effectively.
Well, I agree. I'm glad that it is being talked about, though I regret the focus on one word, because what we should be talking about is the fact that the process has not moved at all. There has been, as the previous speaker described a ceasefire since 1991, agreed between the Frente Polisario and the government of Morocco. But the clear basis for that ceasefire was that Morocco would allow a referendum for self-determination of the people of the Western Sahara. That referendum has never taken place, as you said in your introduction. And that is for one reason, which is because Morocco has refused to allow that referendum to take place. There have been endless rounds of talks and repeated envoys from the UN who've tried to make progress, but the essential fact is that Morocco has blocked that progress. And
Why?
what Ban was doing with this visit was to point out why this was happening. He went there deliberately to draw attention to this. I know from his office that he is deeply frustrated by this issue. He does not want to leave office as Secretary General, which he will leave at the end of this year, without there being progress on this dispute. He feels some personal responsibility for this issue. He feels, I think, the UN's shame that nothing has happened over this dispute. 150,000 refugees have lived in these refugee camps for 40 years since the original Moroccan invasion in 1975. The population of the Western Sahara, the indigenous population, live under political repression, as repeatedly reported by international human rights organizations. This is a travesty and a disgrace, and it should not be allowed to continue. And Morocco should not be allowed to continue to make excuses for this lack of progress. I hope that this drama will bring political attention, above all from the Security Council, to get this process moving and oblige Morocco at last to come to the table and discuss how to allow a referendum as is required under international law.
Right. So, Samir, I want to ask you about that, and I want to ask a very pointed, focused question here, just on the fact that, as Khan points out, there has not been a referendum when there should have been a referendum. Tell me your view on why there has not been a referendum, because we can't dispute that fact.
I am not going to talk based on what some diplomats told me in the UN. I am going to talk based on what Eric Jensen, who was the head of UNORSO between 1994 and 1998, arrived to after 4 years leading the UN mission. In his book on the Western Sahara, Eric Jensen said that because of lack of agreements on voter eligibility, the referendum was unworkable. In addition to the fact that the settlement plan was flawed since the beginning, since it did not take Morocco's and Polisario's reservations into account. And I have to point out here, to set the record straight, that since resolution 1754 of April 2017, the option of referendum was ruled out. And starting from 2007, just the year when Ban Ki-moon came to office, the Security Council adopted the resolution that's called on the parties to strive toward reaching an agreed upon and mutually acceptable political solution. And all observers agree that any political solution should rule out any solution where one of the parties is losing. And there is unanimity among academia that concepts of self-determination, as was promoted in the 1960s, cannot be implemented in today's world. We have to come up with innovative solutions.
Sorry, this
and
is
Morocco,
profoundly
in
misleading what the
came
speaker is
up
saying.
with the proposal of
This
autonomy
is simply not
that
true.
was hailed by the Security Council as serious, credible, and realistic, and offering the basis for reaching a political solution. While when the counter proposal of the Polisario was not hailed by the Security Council, the Council only took note of that counter proposal.
Okay.
And since then, until 2015, all Security Council resolutions repeat the same paragraph, while just taking into account the proposal of the Polisario. This shows that
Samir,
there was implicit support for Morocco's proposal since 2007.
Samir, I feel that you and Khan could probably have a conversation on your own here, and maybe I'll give you each other's email addresses after the show or something like that. But Christos, let's bring you back in as well, because we shouldn't lose sight of the fact of the people here. You know, we can talk politics and diplomacy as much as we want, but you've seen on the ground, I guess, the conditions for the people there, the situation there, and people who are waiting for something to happen that just hasn't happened. Tell me more about that.
more or less, it is exactly as you describe it. People are living in refugee camps in the desert in extremely harsh conditions. And I'm not sure they have actually something to expect. I'm quite sorry saying that, and because unfortunately, I regret to say that I think that this unfortunate wording recently used by Ban Ki-moon will be grabbed, and I think we were already witnessing this, will be grabbed by the Moroccan side, and it will be used as a further excuse to keep the situation as it is, frozen. Let me point out that, to my opinion at least, in this situation, time works in favor of the Moroccan side. Definitely.
I mean, it's been a long time already,
Morocco,
though, hasn't it?
Morocco,
We're 2016 now. The ceasefire was way back in the 90s. How long
exactly,
can they hold out?
Exactly. Moroccan are not in any hurry. They are not in a hurry. The side that really is in a hurry is the Sahrawi and the Polisario side. Polisario fighters, I mean, military speaking again, I quite doubt if there are still actual Polisario men or women in fighting age. Polisario fighters are dying. They're dying out simply of age. Simply, time passes, they're getting older, they're removed, and the new generation, the Sahrawi youth, let's say, they don't seem present. They don't seem present, again, military speaking. You do not meet young Polisario fighters in Western Sahara.
Okay,
There's no such a thing. It's an oxymoron.
Okay, let's start to sum things up because we are starting to run out of time. Khan, let me come back to you in New York. We've pointed out numerous times that this is a frozen process, that nothing's happening. Who or what could kickstart it, if not the United Nations? Is there African Union? Are there neighbours who could mediate something to kickstart the whole thing?
Well, interesting that you mentioned the African Union because they've begun to become much more vocal about the issue and demand that it be resolved. But the world community is clear that this belongs under the mandate of the UN Security Council. And the UN Security Council has been pretty clear about this, that there needs to be progress. And unlike your speaker from Rabat, what the Security Council actually says is that there needs to be a mutually agreeable solution on the basis of self-determination for the people of Western Sahara. That is not an easy thing to agree upon. I accept that. But there does need to be real talks, and that is what Ban is saying, that there needs to be real talks about this. I don't really see what is so unreasonable about demanding that Morocco come to the table and talk about an issue where people have been left suffering for so long. As an individual, as an independent person, as a humanitarian, the situation is unacceptable and intolerable, and Morocco should be obliged to come to the table to talk about it.
Samir, I've got 40 seconds left, so let's keep it brief. Real talks is what Khan says, and he's right. Someone's got to start talking at some point.
Morocco has shown its readiness to talk since the beginning, and that's why it came up with the autonomy plan. And autonomy plan offers one of the options enshrined in international law for self-determination, which is autonomy, according to Resolution 2625 of October 1970. The autonomy could be a solution that preserves the rights of the Sahrawis to exercise their right to self-determination, and that's where the UN and Ban Ki-moon has failed, because someone who has failed for 9 years. I have no hope. It would be wishful thinking to think that Ban Ki-moon and Christopher Ross would be able to help the parties achieve any progress. Ban Ki-moon and Christopher Ross are not the right people to achieve that.
We'll leave it there. Samir Benis, Christos Satsoulis and Khan Ross, we thank you very much for this discussion today on Morocco. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, please head to our Facebook page as well, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Conversations on Twitter as well, @AJ Inside Story is our handle there. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon.